Hey guys, I've been on a bit of a Lego Monkey Kid kick lately. It's a very surprisingly well-written show, or well, I guess it isn't that surprising since Lego historically has written really good shows. But Lego Monkey Kid is particularly mature and complex, at least at its core. Maybe not on the surface, but definitely at its core. But I think Lego Monkey Kid is unique from other Lego shows, not just because it's hand-drawn animation, but also because of the way it's written. It's just a little bit deeper, or a little bit stronger, and a lot more flawed. I don't mean that there are a lot of mistakes in the writing, I mean that the characters are allowed to be more real, they're allowed to be seriously flawed, and just the realism of the show can be pretty depressing at times. One of the highlights of the show for me is its depiction of the character Sun Wukong. He is incredibly complex and incredibly flawed, and often a bad role model, which seems wrong because he's supposed to be the hero, or at least a heroic figure in the show. Thankfully, this man is not the main character. I actually do tend to have a lot of issues when characters in kids' shows are really bad role models. And I don't mean that they need to be perfectly sanitized and inhuman to be appropriate, but if the character doesn't learn their lesson and keeps being treated as if they're not doing anything wrong, then that's a huge problem for kids' media. Maybe part of the reason why Sun Wukong works so well as a character in his particular show is, partly because it's a different kids' show that's a bit more mature, but also because he is not the main character. The main character is usually someone we're supposed to look up to, and in this case I think we might initially look up to him and we might sometimes look up to him, but the show is actually teaching us the danger of looking up to people too much. Similarly to all those Knuckles series reviews I did, this is a bigger project for me and it might be a bit difficult to finish. Because once I had the thought to analyze this character and I started going through some of the older episodes, the amount of notes I wrote down were so extensive and I realized there was just so much to unravel here that I could not do it in one video. So I'm going to try it this way. I'm going to analyze Season 1 and 2 Sun Wukong for a bit, and maybe if that goes well and I have the strength, I'll do a part 2 because there is just so much to unpack with this character. In the opening movie for Season 1 of Lego Monkey Kid, Wukong is introduced as this legendary figure who did some really great feats and was known for just a lot of exploits, good and bad. He's just been absent for quite some time. According to legend, the last thing he did was trap the demon Bull King under a mountain, sealing it with his staff. Many years later, our protagonist MK accidentally runs into the demon Bull King's wife and son trying to free him. During this encounter, MK realizes he can wield Wukong's staff, which is normally impossible. Wukong takes notice of this and decides to make MK his new protege, but he doesn't just come out and say this, he waits for MK to find him, even though he's been with MK this whole time in disguise. Since MK will be Wukong's successor, it's implied that Wukong will train MK. But while Wukong definitely bestows him with power, it seems like when it comes to training him, he only does so very casually and when he gets around to it, and also preventing him from learning super serious stuff. Wukong does not seem to be a very present mentor in MK's life at all. Sometimes he's there to give him a word of advice, which is occasionally questionable advice, but the most he actually does for him in the first half of Season 1, other than give him the power, is put a limit on that power so MK can more easily control it. He seems content to let MK learn things by himself for himself, and we don't even see him actually train with MK until episode 7. Wukong gave MK this power and told him that he will be his successor, but he is not there with him to show him how to wield his power as he should. This leaves MK feeling very frustrated and also very vulnerable to other mentors in his life, really bad ones. Of course I'm talking about Macaque. Macaque is easily able to take advantage of MK in this situation. MK needs guidance and his real mentor isn't really giving it to him properly. So even though Macaque definitely doesn't have MK's best interests at heart, he is there, he is present. And he teaches MK to fight without mercy and condemns Wukong's more patient approach. Wukong does slowly start to show some concern in MK's new behaviors, and MK finally lashes out at him with his impatience on not being taken seriously enough. And we do find out that part of the reason why Wukong's been so casual and slow with MK is because he doesn't want MK to hurt himself through overexertion by using too much of this great power. MK is not an immortal like Wukong. Still though, since Wukong suspected something was off, he should have investigated, but it seems like he doesn't really do anything until the damage has already definitely been done. Macaque totally has MK wrapped around his finger at this point, but Wukong seems upset with MK for going around with another mentor. I think Wukong should have been more concerned about his own mentoring instead of just chastising MK. I don't think MK would have ever felt the need to go to someone like Macaque if Wukong had been there for him more already. Fortunately, Wukong does come to help MK at the last minute. Unfortunately, he still blames MK for foolishly trusting Macaque, when I think that's really something he should have taken responsibility for. But at least here, Wukong is finally helping in a real and tangible way. This is also the first time that we as the audience know that Wukong actually cares about MK. Up until this point, we haven't seen any real proof that Wukong cares about MK at all, but now we see Wukong shielding MK, protecting him, and being genuinely concerned about him, so that's why this fight is a bit of a turning point. Thankfully, after this, it does seem Wukong is paying a bit more attention to MK. In the opening of the Season 2 movie, we see Wukong not only train with MK, but also initiating some wholesome quality time with him. However, once Wukong finds out that the Lady Bone Demon is back, he regresses to become even worse than he ever was at the beginning. Wukong all but abandons MK and everyone else. He tells them that he's on vacation and acts like nothing is wrong. He also gives MK unrealistic tasks with zero prep or help or decent instructions. Of course, the real reason this is happening is because Wukong is terrified of all these people getting hurt and is trying to fix the Lady Bone Demon issue by himself. On the surface, his actions appear completely callous and nasty. Wukong continues to barely communicate via astral projection and is not easy to reach. He tries to encourage MK, but of course, MK needs more than just to hear, "You can do it," when he's overwhelmed with serious threats. We know that Wukong is struggling with even more serious threats, but again, he isn't telling anyone this, so he just appears like a lazy asshole. Ironically, in all Wukong's efforts to protect MK from the Lady Bone Demon, he is not there to help him when she inevitably shows up. This causes MK to quickly slip into a very dark place mentally. He starts experiencing traumatic flashbacks and feels that Wukong has really abandoned him and regrets choosing him as a successor. This is exactly what happens when you have no communication in a relationship. Unfortunately, this causes MK to start acting exactly like Wukong. He doesn't tell anyone about his encounter with her. He doesn't tell anyone what he's going through and what's going on. He just becomes obsessed with training to get stronger, all by himself, all while telling himself that he's doing this to protect everyone else. Normally, emulating your mentor would be a good thing, but in this case, it is portrayed as a very, very bad thing.
You know, you really are just that bit too much like him.
Guess who's back to take advantage of MK? And you know what's even worse? Is that even though Macaque is tormenting MK, he's also the one that's warning him about what's coming. Wukong isn't even there to do that. It should also be noted that Macaque does have a little bit of sympathy for MK due to his own troubled history with Sun Wukong. But even so, Macaque does not have MK's best interest to heart. Wukong does, and yet he is not acting it out. MK gradually becomes very resentful to Wukong. And who can blame him for that? Finally, a very bruised and beaten Wukong returns quite literally at the last moment once again to help MK, but at this point, Lady Bone Demon is so powerful, all he can do is take MK and retreat. Pigsy, MK's real father figure, rightfully confronts Wukong on how he apparently abandoned MK at the worst possible time. While Wukong was trying to find a way to defeat LBD and didn't tell anyone because the journey to finding the Samadhi Fire was so dangerous, he felt responsible to take all that on himself because he is immortal, but still doesn't excuse this awful communication. And now he's in such bad shape that he can't refuse help, even from mortals. This finally leads us to Season 3, where a depowered Wukong is more present with MK than ever before.